I am an atheist activist, and I currently serve as the president of the University of Michigan Secular Student Alliance.
Not only that, but she serves as a pretty much archetypal example why this sort of feminism is poisoning atheism. Let's take a look, shall we?
Somebody choosing to moderate their own channel or Twitter, someone choosing not to communicate on a certain social network with someone or a group of someone's, is not the same thing as silencing that someone or group of someone's. If you want to disagree with somebody, you don't have to go to their channel and post on it. You can post on your own channel. You still have freedom to speak. But somebody with their own private property or in their own private domain is perfectly entitled to moderate what goes on in that domain because it belongs to them, not to you. Someone's Twitter or someone's Facebook or someone's YouTube channel is their property, not yours.
Well, first of all, places like YouTube and Twitter are not private spaces. They are public communication media. This is not like inviting someone into your personal property, because we have different rules for things like property ownership than we do for free speech. Indeed, if you wanted a more accurate analogy, YouTube is more like going down to a public open space and putting your ideas out there in the open marketplace of ideas. And the reason that that's great is because in the open marketplace of ideas, good ideas generally propagate better than bad ones. And that's a good thing for society. That is, if your arguments really cannot stand the rigour of public scrutiny and criticism, they're probably bullshit. Now, a more accurate analogy of how you think this public communication media should function is more like you get on your soapbox, and when anyone in the crowd cries, "I think you're wrong," you evict them from the space where that discussion is happening. Well, if you want to create an echo chamber, that's fine. And if you want to create a forum where you can preach to everyone and no one has the right to reply, well, we have names for forums like that. They're called churches.
If you believe that everyone's Twitter or everyone's YouTube or something should be an open forum of discussion, that's the way you think things should be. But for a lot of people, it's not that way.
Yeah, you're right. Many who are given this functioning public communication media choose to run it more like a church than an open marketplace of ideas. And for me, and for many others who have this very strong commitment to the fundamental virtues of a first world society, this is a deal breaker.
The best you can do is, if you're running a forum, is to institute very strict moderation, who gets in, who gets to stay. Utilize the block button on Twitter.
In an instant, it shows that person's dismissive contempt for one of the most important aspects of modern society. If they're willing to throw free expression in an open public media under the bus for personal convenience simply because they have that option, fuck them. Yeah, sure, it's a choice by them, but it's a choice that shows that they would prefer the echo chamber or church approach. And I'm really not so sure that that's a re-endorsement for someone claiming to be a critical thinker.
In that same vein, harassment policies at conferences should not be limiting to you. I've been to many conferences since this conversation started. I was at the conference, Women in Secularism 1, where this conversation actually did get started. And I've seen these harassment policies. They're not that restrictive.
I think we're looking at different policies. I'm looking at the ones that want fake jewelry and offensive speech banned at conferences.
We're not asking for anything crazy, just basic rules so that we can say, the sort of thing like making fake jewelry and intentionally offending people is not okay.
And if you really think that's the way to go, fine. Then I find your brand of feminism offensive. Does this now mean you should be banned from any conference you should turn up at for harassing behaviour?
The only people who would be potentially hurt or limited by these policies are people who want to be creeps. Do you want to be a creep at conferences, Thunderfoot? I didn't think so. If not, the harassment policies don't affect you.
Well, actually, if the harassment policies include offensive speech, then yes, it does. For my part, I think Dave Silverman gets it absolutely right, that above all, conferences should be fun.
Well, we followed the recent rally with our largest American Atheist convention ever, and it was our most fun American Atheist convention ever. One of the things that I feel very strongly about is that conventions need to be fun. They need to be informative, they need to be empowering, but they also need to be fun.
And you're not going to get that with a bunch of hyper-offendable feminists trying to make the whole bloody conference about their professional victimhood.
If it is spelled out in black and white what is and is not acceptable at that conference, we define what that harassment is, then we can say whether or not there's any legitimacy to these claims. Which means you would no longer have to complain about people talking about rape threats or other things that you don't see as being threatening. I don't think that rape threats are acceptable. But we wouldn't be talking about whether or not they were acceptable if it was written black and white in the rules, rape threats are not acceptable.
What the fuck are you on about? Where did I ever say that rape threats weren't threatening? I mean, let me be absolutely clear. If someone makes a credible threat that they're going to rape you, then that's a criminal offence, whether you're at the conference or not at the conference. If you like, there is already a harassment policy that covers that absolutely. It's called the law. But it's even worse than that. There are no rape threats at conferences, just like there are no babies microwaved at conferences. But should we now have an anti-baby microwaving policy at conferences? Well, why not? Because, of course, the only people who would be affected by that policy are people planning to microwave babies. I mean, you're not planning to microwave a baby, are you? So why would you oppose such a policy? Or now maybe you can see that there might be a downside to this. Like maybe a right-wing group picking this up and saying that atheist conferences are so immoral that they need an anti-baby microwaving policy. Or maybe, just maybe, this is the sort of thing that will discourage ladies from attending a conference. I mean, I've got to admit, if I was going to a conference and part of the rules said that murder, mutilation, rape and torture threats are against the conference rules, that would just put so many red flags up for me. I mean, I stand to be corrected. But please, just tell me when someone last threatened to rape someone at a secular type conference. Or, for that matter, eat a baby. And until such evidence is forthcoming, you are proposing a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And in doing so, you're making us all look like immoral losers. And you are pointlessly disenfranchising women from this movement by creating such fictitious boogeymen. And that is why you are poisoning atheism.
Conferences are privately funded affairs, meaning the organizers of that conference, like the moderators of YouTube channels and Twitter accounts, are entitled to make any rules that they want. If you don't want to follow those rules, don't go to the conference.
Yeah, that's sort of right. And the biggest goal of such conferences is to have people going home thinking, wow, that was fun. Let's do that again. And let's bring some friends next time. And I'll be frank, all of this bullshit that's grown out of one guy asking one professional victim feminist out for coffee is an absolute mood killer for 9 out of 10 in this community, myself included. You know, the 9 out of 10 who, when they go to such a conference, expect to be treated like a responsible adult and not to get nannied by some absurdly politically correct list of do's and don'ts. And yeah, to be honest, I'm really pissed that it ever came to this. I'm a solid believer in the big tent approach, and that civil wars, the ones that always kill more of your guys than any others, should be avoided at all costs. But this poisonous splinter has worked itself in so far, it's become so distracting, so diversionary, that I now fully support the earlier call from the Atheist Plus movement for all of you crazy feminists to join their completely socially progressive movement. Yeah, you do that. You organise your own conferences, your Atheism Plus style conferences, where you will be happier, with your church-style discourse rather than this messy, open marketplace of ideas, where you can pander as much as you want to the paranoid and the professional victim minority, where you can try to create this safe space from threats that don't even exist, and let the rest of us, the mature, responsible adults, have our own conferences where the big boys and the big girls can have responsible fun together.
No matter how I try to look at it, and no matter how fairly I try to examine the situation, the only conclusion that I can come to is that this is less about some sort of righteous crusade and more about Thunderfoot. I don't actually think that Thunderfoot is looking out for the best of the movement. I don't think that he actually cares as much about the movement as a whole as he would like to think that he does. He might think that he does.
Well, that's just wrong on so many levels, and this is why it's generally best to keep the discussion limited to arguments and not who's making them. Else you end up expressing opinions that you think that I don't care about as much of the movement as I think I do, even though I might think that.
I don't think that he actually cares as much about the movement as a whole as he would like to think that he does. He might think that he does. But in the end, I think it's less about the good of the movement and more about the good of Thunderfoot and his opinions.
Oh boy, did you ever choose the wrong day to release this? The same day that I announced that I was basically making all of the donations of last year available for a prize fund to promote rational video making on YouTube. And for good reason.
And when it comes to the movement, YouTube, Twitter, that kind of stuff doesn't actually matter that much.
And there you are 100% absolutely, categorically wrong. The internet is where religions come to die, especially the viral media like YouTube. And this is why folks like myself have been thinking of ways to prevent this slow die-off that this community has been experiencing and to encourage new talent into this forum. However, I'm just one guy with no experience at doing this sort of thing, which is why I'm currently asking as to what you think the best way to achieve these goals would be. In the meanwhile, I'll leave you with the unintentional irony of this wonderful brand of feminism.
I know activists, real activists, who do things, who try to get the word out, who try to make this country and this world a better, safer place for non-believers, and a place where actual science and reason can flourish. Like, I have never seen somebody with so much hubris as Thunderfoot.